Cool.
Yeah,
So thank you for joining me. It's really appreciated.
you too.
So how would you define a power nerd?
I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to describe it. The best way lately that I've been telling people is if you know you've got something that you need to do, right? And for whatever reason it's difficult for you, specifically on a psychological level. Like I know for myself, my tendency to be introverted is such that being social, going out into public, playing shows even, and touring that environment um, require more from me than somebody who's extroverted. Um, but the fact that you do these things that you know you have to do, even though it's difficult for you, in ways that other people might not relate to, that's the definition of a power nerd for me.
That's a pretty cool definition, actually. And as somebody who is quite introverted myself, I can completely relate to that.
Good Lord, it's like they'd said that the people who don't have that sort of HSP, sort of highly sensitive sort of trip, view social events as just being this, it's just a social event. It's a thing that you go to. But for me, every person is like so intense. It's like everybody's a universe. So when you're tuned into that kind of thing, social environments are just like, Jesus Christ, it's just so much.
Yeah,
And once I'm finished, I need equal or more time just to recover.
exactly. Yeah, you need 3 to 5 business working days to
I
recover
agree
from a social
100%.
event.
I 100% agree. And it doesn't mean I dislike it. It's
Yeah.
just, it's the extent of what it requires from people who are wired in a certain way
Hmm.
uh, is much more than people who aren't wired that way may perceive. So they'll look at you as being like, "What the fuck's wrong with you?" Like,
Yeah.
quit being such a wimp or whatever. But I think to myself, well, what is the definition of a power nerd for me? Is like I do those things.
Yeah.
I go to those events. I go on tour. I leave my house. I do those things.
Yeah.
But under no circumstances would I ever claim that any of those things are effortless. But we do them because it's the right thing to do in many ways. And so there's another definition of it, right?
Awesome. Thank you.
No,
So
no.
I think you've got 28 albums under your belt across all of your projects.
Maybe even more, I think,
Maybe even
including
more. Yeah.
yeah, the live records and all that.
Yeah. So how do you stay motivated and inspired? Because that's a lot.
Well, I guess the easiest way to describe it is that music is a byproduct of my life rather than my life being an addition to my musical mind, right?
Yeah.
Like life is where I struggle. I mean,
Same.
I do okay. I do okay because I really try, but things like aging parents and kids and long-term relationships and friends and nature of work and people dying and people going away and all these things are where the majority of our efforts I think need to be relegated because those are truly important things. And music for me has always just been this convenient loophole that acts as a way for me to articulate those experiences in some sort of format
Yeah.
that I can, once finished, listen to and get an objective point of view as to where I've been. Um, and so motivation is not the problem because the writing is such an intrinsic part of my day and identity that it's just hand in hand with it. Um, and in fact, I would say that in absence of music, my ability to understand where I'm at as a person would be much, much more difficult.
So is it true that you wrote the music for Powernerd in 11 days?
Um, yes and no. So how I tend to write is because every day I just write. Like if I have a chorus or a verse or an idea, I document it and don't analyze necessarily where it goes. I don't think, oh, I'm going to write a heavy song for this heavy project today, or I'm going to write this quiet thing for a quiet thing. I just write whatever I'm feeling, whatever the day dictates. It's a nice rainy day today, so where I'm at is a little more subdued. And then when I'm finished that, I take those fragments of ideas and I relegate them to different folders on my desktop. And typically those folders end up in four different categories. You've got an abstract, complicated one, deconstruction or the Moth or empath or alien or whatever. We've got a straightforward one, which is like Powernerd, addicted, epic cloud. We've got a sort of meditative one, which would be like Ghost, the Hummer, Dream Piece, Snuggles. And then there's often a wild card, which is just something that's a different angle, like Casualties of Cool or Key or Axolotl or DevLab puzzle. You know, I mean, there's all these sorts of things. And so once those folders become populated with enough material that I think I can sort of glean an identity from them, at that point I start to assemble it. And that usually takes about 2 months, I would say, and includes things like, eliminating some ideas, writing some new ones, taking an existing idea and morphing it into something else, finding an aesthetic for trying to figure out what the font looks like, etc. And as opposed to 2 months, I did the Powernerd one in 11 days. And the reason why I had imposed that sort of deadline on the process is the nature of Powernerd is very linear and very basic. It's like, started at least as like a simple, straight ahead, fun sort of party record. And I figured that with an abridged amount of time in order to do that process, it would yield more urgency. So there's the longest answer ever.
It's not the longest answer ever, believe it or not.
This is a win.
You're winning. Yay. So what I really liked about this particular album, much like your other stuff, but you've got that balance between the heavier things, more ambient things, the fun things, but I really liked the synths, the keyboards, that kind of like 80s kind of feel to it as well.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah,
You
totally.
need to work with Gary Newman. That's all I'm gonna say.
I've got a friend. I got a friend who's done so much with Gary, and so we're familiar with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that is meant to happen, I'm sure it will. I think
Uh,
that my love for that sort of 80s aesthetic obviously comes from the fact that that was my youth, right? Like I
yeah.
was born 1,000 years ago, 1972. So I was 70s and 80s. That was my formative years, and so the synth wave, vapor wave type of aesthetic and music too. It really appeals to me, and I think that it's as much as it's a throwback and sort of has a retro sort of vibe to it. If it's consciously so, it's less inadvertently kitschy. You know what I
hmm
mean?
Yeah.
It's like if I had no awareness of it being kitschy, it would really be cheesy. But because I'm aware of how cheesy those things tend to be, my hope is that we're claiming ownership of it as opposed to just like being in the crossfire of our own subconscious cheese.
That's a great tagline. I think that's what I'm going to call the interview.
Mm,
Fantastic.
subconscious cheese,
Subconscious cheese.
the best type of cheese.
Exactly. So, are there any particular tracks on Power Nerd that you're really proud of that you can't wait to play live?
I never think about playing anything live, really. And when I do, I relegate all my energies to doing so. So it's compartmentalized into a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
But because I find myself so busy in general, that's how I kind of set up my internal dialogue in general, is I compartmentalize things because prior to the time where it's essential for me to focus on it, it can get confusing because the amount of moving parts in my life. So I don't think about that. But in terms of my favorite songs or songs that I'm particularly proud of, I'm proud of the whole album in many ways, not because it's my finest work musically, but because what it took to pull it off amidst the drama and admittedly the grief that my family and I were going through during the process of making this made it so that it was more of a testament to tenacity, which the fact that it was done and the fact that we went through it and the fact that we pulled it off uh, is a is an internal sense of pride, like real pride, like finishing this at many stages in its articulation was I thought it was not going to happen, right? That being said, the song "Goodbye" was really important to me. The whole album is meant, and quite in contradiction to its initial intent. It's a very melancholy record that's meant to, I think, um, provide a musical narrative that outlines the process of grieving, I guess. It's like
Okay.
going through loss and going through death and going through people you care about while you're in the midst of this, like leaving, um, is in stages, it seems. And I was always aware of that. Like they say, the stages of grief are, like there's the initial things and there's acceptance and there's anger and there's surrender and resolution in a sense. And I feel that in the beginning, because the record was just supposed to be a party record, that intent wasn't there, but almost immediately upon making it, all this shit happened in our life. And so the lyrics ended up changing to incorporate that sort of process of getting through those moments that seem like insurmountable. And the song "Goodbye" uh, was the pinnacle of that. Like the last chorus of that, I really struggled to sing that during the period that it was being written, just because it was so emotionally fucked up back then. But the fact that it turned out the way it did, whenever I do hear that song in context, I think that's a very, for me, that's a real powerful moment, and I'm proud of that one.
Awesome. I mean, I really like the transition, from the title track, and then you've got Jainism, and then you've got Gratitude, which is a very uplifting kind of
Yeah,
track as well. But I
yeah,
have to say, I'm not gonna give it away for, the people that haven't listened to it yet, because obviously it's not out until October
I know,
25th.
I know what you're
But
gonna say though.
yeah, you know what I'm gonna say, right? Ruby Quaker
Yeah,
is my anthem. I felt so seen and also attacked at the same time when I first heard that track. So thank you for that.
you
And
have to
that is
tell
going
me
to be
the.
my anthem for the rest of my life.
You need to tell me the ways in which you felt attacked because that's intriguing.
Well, I can't really say anything without giving it away to the listeners and the viewers, but
Go for it.
I have a problem
Okay. And that is with
um
coffee or with tea?
with coffee.
Oh, so you like your coffee.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely
I
100%.
Well, let me just say that if what your perception from the song is an attack, then I keep in mind that I'm attacking myself
Yeah.
because I'm so all aboard the coffee train. It's like
Hmm.
perverse, right? How
Yeah.
do you like your coffee?
Oh, it, without sounding controversial, every way.
So you are legit. This is not, you're not fucking around. This is legit.
No, like
Oh,
5 or 6 cups a day. I've got a machine in the kitchen.
okay.
Obsessed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I go through 3 cups, but I also find that I hit this wall where I just feel like I'm gonna barf, and then
yeah.
I'm like, oh, it must be lunch.
Exactly. It's like, oh, I need to eat. And then you start
Yeah,
again.
yeah. Then you start again. I can't do it after noon, right? I think you're probably much younger than but I would say that when I finally did hit 50, I've always had problems with insomnia,
Uh-huh.
but past the age of 50, it's like, your metabolism changes and your hormones change and all these things, and now I just can't sleep for fucking shit. So I got to be really careful with coffee after noon.
Well, it's just after 11 o'clock at night here, and I'm drinking coffee, and I will quite happily go to sleep after that.
You know what? I stand in awe.
I'm 35 as well, so I'm not that much younger.
Yeah, that's it. You know what? That's a skill. I don't think of that as being a liability. I think of that as being a superpower.
Awesome, thanks. That's what makes me a power nerd.
There you go.
But honestly, when I heard that song, I felt so attacked, but I laughed the entire time. I
Well,
did.
the whole idea with it as well is after you go through these moments of just profound fucking soul-shaking sadness, like,
Yeah.
just like to the point where I was thinking while I was making the record, I was like, I wonder if I'm ever gonna come out of this.
Hmm.
it's like everything makes you cry after not crying for 50 years. It's just this onslaught of emotional growth, I guess, which again, I'm grateful for because it's better out than in, and the amount of people that repress those things, myself included, that it ends up coming out in inappropriate ways, either passive aggressive or whatever, is many.
Yeah.
So to be thrust into a scenario where all of a sudden the deadlines were such as they were, but also the sadness was so unavoidable that there was nothing you could do to suppress it. It was going to come out and it did. Um, Getting through that at the end, originally the record was going to end with goodbye. And when it did do that and I listened to it, I just thought, oh, great. So what note you're ending on here is you're just fucking blown apart.
Yeah.
Like, like, how is that? How is that an overview of the experience? And I guess at that point it was.
Yeah.
But then as the process continued, and there was a day that just a buddy of mine came over when I was just in the up to my knees in it all, and he was like, "Man, you look spent. Let's go get a coffee." And it seemed to be indicative of almost like, well, the pendulum swings, right? And on the other side is the next day. And how do we start our day?
Coffee.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think it rounds the album off really nicely because like you said, you've got this deep emotional track with Goodbye and it's quite heavy and it's quite thought-provoking and it elicits a lot of different kind of emotions. But
Yeah,
then it kind of transitions into this kind of like light, not light-hearted, but kind of like this poking fun kind of, there is light at the end of the tunnel kind of
there
thing
is.
because you
That's
have
how it
coffee.
felt. Yeah. Well, coffee is a component of it, but I'm going to also give some serious thought to the fact that the reason why there's light at the end of the tunnel is coffee. That's pretty good too. But that's exactly what the point was. And then by the time the record is over, I find myself, I leave the experience on a really, for me at least, an empowered note.
Yeah.
And that's much more practical at this point than just leaving on a note where you're just like a puddle, right?
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Absolutely. So, moving on a little bit from that, literally about 20 minutes before this interview, I got a notification that you have made a big announcement
Yeah.
for a big orchestral show. Can you tell the viewers about that?
I've been working on a project that is rooted in my childhood love of musicals and operas. And since I was 12 years old, I remember thinking to myself, one day I'm going to make a musical, I'm going to make an opera. And I've been spending the past decade writing this project called The Moth. And it's a part of the four record process or project that Powernerd is included in. So it's Powernerd, The Moth, Axolotl, and Ruby Quaker. Um, but because I've been working on this for 10 years, it's the feature of this particular period of my life, and it's in a lot of ways it's kind of like my life's work in a sense. And I got approached by North Netherlands National Orchestra and Choir about 4 years ago, who are one of the best orchestras around, specifically in the Netherlands. And they offered to debut it and perform that with me. Um, and so I've been, now we're deep. I had a meeting with the choral director this morning and the orchestral arranger. We got the band coming, and The Moth is not only like a musical opera kind of, it's very heavy, it's very dark, it's very complicated, it's fucked up. Um, but in one of the things that's so important about it to me is it's like a solo vocal performance. Like from beginning of the Moth to the end, it's like made for essentially one singer. And the concept of transformation, even when we're looking at it from the same point of view as we did with Power Nerd, where transformation from life to death, even is we tried to use the caterpillar to the moth as a an analogy for that process that could be adhered to different things, whether or not it's death or aging or kids leaving home or losing a friend or losing a loved one or whatever. And the moth is just, I don't know, it's the easiest way for me to say it again is it's kind of like my life's work. It's this thing that I've been wanting to do, and it's been on my bucket list since I was 12 years old, and now I'm doing it.
That's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
your music is very much like a musical, you know, it's very grand, it's very energetic, but it's also quite
Mm.
dark as well. I've
Yeah.
been to a few of your live shows. How do you keep up the momentum with all of that energy, apart from coffee?
Well, exercise, meditation, and some sorts of discipline on tour is the best thing. So I tend to, I'll eat anything when I'm home, but sometimes when I'm on tour, I just go vegan and make sure that I start and end the day with meditation and do exercise 5 days a week and the vocal warm-ups. And those, it's funny, it's like small amounts of restraint that we impose on ourselves in ways that may seem innocuous, right? Like not eating salt or whatever it is. I think that the mechanism that cultivates in us for being able to stay the course when it comes to other parts of our life that require discipline is tangible. So I keep myself in check with the intensity of being on tour and doing all the things that I do live by just imposing those sorts of disciplines on myself, I guess.
I mean, you've had quite an extensive career. What would you say has been one of your biggest standout moments so far?
I'm still here
Well, okay.
for real. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like I don't think of what I've done as accomplishments as much as just a byproduct of trying to keep myself focused and aimed in the right direction conceptually.
Yeah.
But I will say that if the quality of people around me is anything to go by, then I'm clearly on the right track, you know? So
Yeah.
I think that in terms of standout moments, I mean, there's been tons. There's been like the Royal Albert stuff and the festival headline slots and the Plovdiv thing and the Retinal Circus. And there's been so much, but I don't, I hate thinking about the past. I hate listening to the old records and looking at old photos. And it's not where my head's at. I'm always thinking about what the thing I'm currently doing is and
Yeah.
how that informs the things that seem to be on the horizon. So I have no doubt that there's been lots of standout moments, but I struggle to think of any.
No, that's fair enough. So, speaking of tours, I know that you're heading out on a small UK tour with Miles Kennedy in November to do an acoustic set. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So, are there any plans in the future to go out on a tour to promote Powernerd?
yeah. So we're just finalizing dates now. It's less touring than I had done in the past because, I'm older and my life has changed. But I also recognize the importance and the value of going through that process, which, as we talked about in the beginning, those of us who are uh, introverted would find very daunting.
Yeah.
But I can't do what I do without the audience, right? And so part of being able to create and sustain a healthy relationship with an audience is to be present for performance as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So, last question before I let you go.
Yeah,
If you could put together your own dream festival of 5 artists or bands, living or dead, who would you choose?
the show would open with a band called Grotus from San Francisco. Um,
Okay.
then the Young Gods would play.
Hmm.
Uh, Prior to the show opening, Rapun from Newcastle, a solo performer who's arguably my favorite artist, would provide ambience. And then it would be Grotus, Young Gods. The headliner, I think, is definitely Enya.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so that's three, and I need two more. Right before Enya, let's put Morbid Angel. I think that would be pretty good. And
That's
then
quite a
we,
transition there.
yeah, it is. It is. And then who would be that fourth one? There's so much that I listen to, but it's like it's such my listening habits are so different than they used to be. Oh, Old Lady Drivers.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's quite a different show. I mean, I hear all sorts of weird and wonderful answers to this, but I think that's my favorite one so far. The more obscure, the better.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny. It's like now that I sit and I'm able to really be cognizant of what I listen to now. Um, I listen to just, it's all really, really minimal ambient music. That's all I listen to, really. Other than when I'm mowing the lawn, and at that point I'll listen to metal. But everything else is like it's like the more subtle it can be presented as, the more I enjoy it because then it's like a component to your day and to the room that you're listening to it in, as opposed to being like a feature. And that's where I'm at right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So,
You're
Power
welcome.
Nerd is out October 25th. Is there anything that you would like to say to the fans?
Um, I'll see you soon.